Hey everyone, Benthebarguy back with another video to help you make better drinks. And today we're gonna do a little cocktail called the Buck and a how-to from start to finish. A little history of the Buck, what makes a Buck. It's really just the ginger and being in a highball glass. And also, this video is in conjunction with the Soil and Water Conservation Society's national chapter here in Washington, D.C., who reached out to a local distillery, MurLarkey, to give us a special product to try and use in a cocktail and talk about conservation in the distilling process. So if you're ready to make better drinks, grab yourself a cocktail and let's do it. Now we're working with the Buck. The Buck is a classic cocktail that goes all the way back to the 1800s, likely made in the late 1800s first in Bermuda by Royal Naval officers as they drank Bermudan rum from goslings and put it in a ginger highball, thus creating the first dark and stormy. That's right, you've heard of Bucks before. The dark and stormy is a Buck. In fact, probably the first Buck. Maybe the most famous Buck is the Moscow Mule. Get it? Moscow is where vodka comes from, and mule's Buck. Moscow Mule, that's where the drink came from. But it also was the first time vodka was used to really market something. It turns out Americans didn't really drink vodka in the 1900s that much. It wasn't really even at cocktail bars in the rail. And in order to offload a lot of this product, Smirnoff and a couple of its representatives thought, hey, why don't we take the Buck cocktail, which is at the time, Mamie Taylor, a Scotch Buck, was very popular. They were like, let's take the Scotch Buck, sub out the vodka, we'll call it a Moscow Mule, which is cute, and then we'll put it in these copper mugs and market it better. It'll look better and people will drink it more. And it worked. And it was the first time that vodka had been marketed in a special way to outperform other spirits. And from that point forward, vodka really took a leap. The Moscow Mule helped it bounce into another stratosphere, and in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, vodka takes off, really through marketing campaigns and less about spirit. Now we're gonna talk about why we chose the products we did. All right, today, this is Smokehouse whiskey from MurLarkey Distillery near Washington, D.C. These guys are doing some interesting stuff. They really come from the infusion world, infusing spirits with various flavors. That's where they got their start. They were bar owners taking home basically bad kegs that they couldn't use or sell at their bar anymore. And they would take that beer, distill it, and make it into spirit. And then they would infuse that spirit with whatever they thought was cool. Well, then they thought, well, we can get into this distilling business. And they go out and they make Smokehouse. Now, what's the difference between Smokehouse whiskey and their heritage whiskey that's made also at the distillery? Well, turns out the mash bill is the same, but these guys are taking chips of wood, cooking bacon and pork belly over a barrel, and they are flavoring the barrel with those smoky flavors. And then after 2.5 years of aging, they spend the last couple months putting the whiskey in these barrels, and that's what gives it its smoky flavor. And boy, does it have some smoke. It could be a little bit dominating if you're just drinking it neat. But in the cocktail I'm gonna show you today, the Manhattan Buck, made with Smokehouse, does a great job of having perfect little smoky elbows with our spicy little ginger, and we come out with a great product. We'll go into that in just a second. We should also talk about how they conserve things at the distillery. When they put all the grains together and they make their mash, and the yeast work on that mash and create alcohol that they then start to distill off, what's left is called spent mash. But it has nutritional value for feed for animals. So one way that MurLarkey tries to be conservationist is that it recycles its feed, its spent mash, as feed to local farmers in Virginia. Another thing that MurLarkey does is they say they're from farm to flask. And what they mean by that is everything that you're drinking in this bottle comes from Virginia. It's local, and it's grain that's grown in Virginia, harvested in Virginia, brought to them, they turn it into a beer, then a whiskey, and the distillation process. Everything's right there from one place. The next thing I'll mention is that MurLarkey is certified by the Virginia Department of Agriculture as Virginia's Finest Certified. And that certification means that the company meets all state and federal regulations, but it also exceeds industry standards. The last thing MurLarkey does to be conservationist is they reuse water in their cooling process. They take water that is used to chill the fermentation tanks, because fermentation always is creating heat, and they need to control that and cool down the process in order to make sure the yeast survive and eat all of the sugars out of the grain and produce more alcohol. In order to do that, they use jackets around their mash tun to cool the process. But that water is in a closed system and is recycled. So there's no loss, there's no pouring water down the drain for no reason. It's very much recirculatory and conservationist in that way. So all right guys, we've talked about the Moscow Mule, we've talked about the Dark and Stormy, we've talked about the conservationist way in which MurLarkey, a local product, makes their smokehouse whiskey. Now let's talk about the Buck. Now our classic Buck recipe is like this. It has a ½ ounce of spirit, 3/4 of our ginger syrup, all right, that we make in-house. And then we use soda to make it a highball. Then we make usually 2 ounces of booze. But what I found when I taste tested Smokehouse is that it makes a great Manhattan Buck, or what we're gonna call today, the climate changer. The climate changer for my Soil and Water Conservation Society, folks. That's right, because Buck, climate change? I mean, if the Moscow Mule was being cute, Buck climate change works, am I right? The way we're gonna do this is a ½ ounce of lemon. This is always our spec for Bucks. We do 3/4 of ginger syrup. Now you might be asking, Ben, well, how do you make this ginger syrup? Oh, I'm glad you asked how we made our ginger syrup. So what we do, we get an omega juicer, and it's what's called a masticating juicer. All that means is it really grinds up ginger root good, okay? Basically, we feed the ginger into this top hole. We push it down through this tube. It reaches this corkscrew effect. The juice comes out right here into this little bucket, and this would be over a trash can and would be whatever is spent. In other words, the rest of the ginger root that has no juice left. It has great yield. All of the juice in the ginger root pretty much comes out, and it's great to use. However, it's very expensive. So if you're a restaurant or bar out there, I recommend it. It's gonna last a while. You might have to replace the parts, but for the most part, the machine itself is great, long lasting. I will put some links, some of the ginger juicers you may be able to get. I can also put a link in the description to a great syrup, and is made in a very similar method from True Syrups, which in the District of Columbia area, you can get at a lot of Whole Foods. All right, so what do you do once you get the actual juice of ginger? Well, it's pretty straightforward. You want to take about 33.8 ounces or a liter of ginger juice and add about 2 pounds or 24 ounces of sugar by weight. And what that'll do when you finally get it incorporated and dissolved is give you a syrup that's at about between 40 and 45 bricks of sugar, which is a sweetness that's just a little less sweet than our simple syrup, which is usually at 50 bricks, but it also has more power. It's got more elbows, it's pretty strong. Ginger has a little kick to it, a little spice. I will link that down in the description, and if you guys make it, please comment, give me a like, let me know how that ginger syrup came out for you, and maybe how I can help. One of the things you wanna keep in mind is that the syrup doesn't wanna be heated. So you don't wanna boil the water, like some simple syrups or rich simple syrups. You don't want to do that. You don't want to boil the ginger juice. It'll cook it and change the flavor a bit, make it a little more dull and bitter. Also, if you incorporate the sugar and after a day at the bottom of your container you see white particulate matter, that's not the sugar. It's actually stuff that comes and falls out of the ginger juice itself. The sugar should have incorporated, if you dissolved it on the first day, into the ginger juice pretty easily. And you don't really need heat. There's less sugar in this than there is in a simple syrup. So if you can shake a simple syrup into solution, which we do here at Reliable, without any heat, just some warm water, then you certainly can do it with ginger syrup. Just shake with a little oomph in a container that's closed until all the sugar is dissolved. Okay guys, so we've talked about the history of the Buck, the most popular Bucks, also how to make our ginger syrup the way we do it here, with a little soda instead of making a ginger beer, which was another classic way of making a Buck. Now we're gonna talk about the spirits. We also measured our citrus at ½ ounce and our 3/4 of ginger syrup. We got the Smokehouse whiskey from MurLarkey. We're just gonna do 2 ounces of that because we're gonna make essentially a Manhattan inside a Buck. And when we make Manhattans, we go 2-to-1, meaning 2 ounces of whiskey to 1 vermouth, and we build the drink right inside of a buck with a 1/2 ounce of citrus and 3/4 of ginger. So here's 1 ounce of Cocchi Torino sweet vermouth. Now, Cocchi Torino is an Italian sweet vermouth distributed in DC by Prestige Le Droit, a friend of Reliable Tavern. But Cocchi's a great sweet vermouth if you're using darker spirits especially. And I found when tasting Smokehouse whiskey with the Cocchi Torino, the vanilla and dark kind of sweeter dessertish flavors came out of the vermouth, and we were left with not so much smoke from the Smokehouse. It was kind of a background flavor, and what we really were left with was kind of this sweet dessertish vanilla flavor up front. Now don't forget your bitters. Angostura bitters are what we're using here. And if you were in your local liquor store, Angostura bitters look like this. You can find them in various size bottles. You will notice that we did not have any ice out at all while we were making this drink. We measured the citrus, we measured the ginger, we measured our vermouth, and we measured our whiskey before getting any ice out or ice in our glasses. It's a very simple reason. We don't want to add any melted water to a drink before it gets to a guest, and we want to give the guest the longest time they can have with the drink before it gets diluted. So think of ice like lighting a fuse on a bomb. Once you bring it out and it starts to melt, you only have so long before the bomb goes off and your drink isn't good anymore. So we want to give the guest as much time as possible before bringing and lighting that fuse. Another note about conservation, Reliable Tavern has always used metal straws instead of plastic, just because we can reuse them and wash them and actually save economically on that process. But also when we're drinking out of the straw, the drink actually tastes colder with a metal straw. But in addition, if we don't need to put plastic in trash cans, we don't need to do it. We use, for us, a relatively small cube to shake. If you have cubes at home from your freezer, I would use 2 to 3 tops. And then we use spears that we cut here at Reliable Tavern in-house. But if you didn't have that, just make sure you fill your glass all the way to the top with whatever ice you have in your freezer. What you don't want to do is fill your glass halfway so you can get more booze in there, because the ice melts twice as fast in a half-filled glass. You want the ice to melt slowly and have longer with the drink. So normally, if I was making a Collins or a Ricky, I would fill the soda on the bottom of the glass at exactly or close to as exactly as I could measure with my eye. How much soda I needed would be on the bottom of the glass. And the reason is that when we go to strain the cocktail at the end of the process, it will incorporate. What you don't want to do is strain your cocktail into the bottom of the glass, then add the soda on top, because the soda won't incorporate. It doesn't have as much density. But the difference here with the Buck is a method I'll show you. Now, when we're shaking with a cube, we want to add about a 1/2 ounce to 3/4 of an ounce of water. That's it. So that's a lot less than a shaken up drink, or a lot less than we would stir into a Manhattan normally. And the reason is that we're adding soda, okay? So if you're adding soda to the drink, you don't need as much water from the shake. Now that means your drink isn't going to be as cold. That's the downside. So you want to make sure your soda is as cold as possible. We don't want any soda to be warm when you use it. Otherwise, the temperature of the drink is just going to come out a little bit tepid, okay? We don't want that. All right, so we strain to the last drop, all right? And we have our strained drink in here. Now, why did I strain it in here instead of the glass? Well, I like to add a little soda like this to Bucks. And we get that nice froth from there, and then we pour it into the glass just off the cube till it reaches the top of the glass. And the last little bit, look at that. It's a nice frothy top, which is what we're looking for, okay? And that is a Manhattan Buck. Now, if I were to garnish this drink, I would do it with a lemon. Because we use lemon juice, I wouldn't cut in the middle and leave this over here. I would leave it over here so that it's flagged off. It's just out of the way. Now, for a Manhattan, I like an orange twist. Express it over, put a peel in here. Oh, it's a good drink. The Manhattan Buck is great. But what's cool about this is there's just a little smokiness. It's almost like the Mamie Taylor, that Scotch Buck we talked about earlier, has come back, right? The smokiness, in this case, is reminiscent of that. It also has those vanilla graham cracker flavors up front that are really great. All right, folks, there you have it. A classic Buck, Manhattan Buck style made with this particular Smokehouse whiskey from MurLarkey Distillery here in Virginia. I'm gonna drink this. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope everyone out there has learned a little bit about using maybe a product that's a little different inside of a buck recipe. Pretty simple. I love it. I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for the support. We'll see you guys soon. And thanks to MurLarkey Distillery and the Soil and Water Conservation Society. You guys take care. Have fun. To better drinks. Cheers. Thanks for watching the video, and as always, gotta give some props and love to Reliable Tavern, my employer for the last 4 years where I've been running the bar, and these guys are what make these videos possible. If you like these videos and you want them to keep on rolling, I appreciate the support. You can hit me with a like and subscribe button over here, or some video recommendations over here, all of which will keep these coming. I appreciate you guys. Like always, to better drinks, Nux, Beer Mug, Daiquiri. Love you, mean it.